Okay, it's 3 minutes past 2 o'clock. We do have participants still joining, but I think we will start with the introductions and others can join as the webinar progresses. Good day, everyone. My name is Freddie McBride. I am Director of Policy and Regulation at ENA, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to today's ENA webinar on emergency communications routing and location transmission reliability with SIP PIDF-LO. Before we dive into today's topic, I'd like to briefly introduce ENA. I know some of you may not be familiar with the activities of the organization. ENA is a non-governmental organization with the mission of improving the safety and security of people. We strive for better and more effective emergency communications through fostering collaboration among stakeholders, facilitating the sharing of best practices, and driving innovation to ensure that emergency communications and emergency response continue to evolve and improve. Today's event is a great example of this mission in action, bringing together a broad range of stakeholders with diverse perspectives to tackle the complexities of implementing key technologies like SIP PIDF-LO. For those unfamiliar with SIP PIDF-LO, it stands for, well, the SIP part is Session Initiation Protocol, which is a common protocol for modern networks and services based on packet switch technologies. The PIDF-LO stands for Presence, Information, Data, Format, Location, Object. It's quite a mouthful. In essence, it's a technology that enables more precise transmission of location information for more accurate routing and for more accurate caller location information during emergency communications. And of course, these are essential components for an effective emergency response. However, with any technology transition, there are both opportunities and challenges. Today, we'll explore how different countries are implementing PIDF-LO. We'll learn from their experiences and examine what it takes to ensure a seamless integration across Europe. Collaboration among stakeholders is, of course, essential, and I'm confident today's discussion will provide valuable insights into how we can work together to overcome challenges and make the most of those opportunities. I'm especially delighted to welcome our esteemed presenters today. We have a panel of experts, each of whom brings a unique insight, a wealth of knowledge and practical experience in implementing SIP PIDF-LO. But before we begin, a couple of housekeeping matters. So this webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be available on our website shortly after the session. As we are using Zoom, automatically translated captions are available. So you can find the captions button at the top of your screen. Click on the arrow as shown in the slide. Under Translate To, you'll find a list of languages that you can view. And if you want to change languages, simply follow those same steps again. If you have any questions during the presentations, please use the questions and answer feature to put your questions to the panel. And after the presentations, we've allocated 30 minutes for a dedicated Q&A session. So you'll have the opportunity to put questions to the panel on their presentations, and then we'll have a sort of a broader discussion. And if you do have a contribution to make during that 30-minute discussion, please raise your hand and we can enable your microphone to speak. And we do encourage all of you to share your questions, any insights you have or experiences you have, and ideas for future collaboration on implementing SIP PIDF-LO in a seamless way. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Michael Prosler, Chief Executive Officer of Grid Gears and Vice Chair of ENA's Tech and Ops Committee. Michael will kick things off by introducing SIP PIDF-LO, the concept, and its application in emergency communications. Michael, over to you.
Thank you, Freddie. I hope everybody can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Perfect. And yeah, also warm welcome from my side to this webinar. And thank you, Freddie, for the kind introduction. As Freddie already mentioned, we're talking about presence, information, data format, and location object especially. And before starting into the real world examples from my fellow co-presenters, I want to explain a little what the whole idea of the data formats is, and we will walk through examples and really walk through each detail and what is basically represented and how you can represent location information. But stepping one step back, what is a data format? in general. So a data format is a way of exchanging data between two different systems, and it's obviously very important that both systems speak the same language. And this is obviously not always the case, especially you can, for example, represent location information in many different ways. This is just one example where one on the left side represents latitude and longitude as a decimal, and on the right-hand side, it's expressed as radius and degrees. So what is a good data format in general? So good data formats addresses one specific problem in a standardized way, and they are really specific about it. So that means that everybody who's implementing it will be able to integrate and interconnect with other systems speaking the same data format. Probably the most important aspect of a good data format is also that it's open. So that means everybody can access it, everybody can see the specification, and everybody has the ability to integrate and implement those data formats. And although good data formats address a specific problem, they should still be able to adapt to new technologies or to include additional information as it's needed by the progress in technology. And in that way, they need to be flexible and extendable, but in a standardized way. So that also kind of means they need to be backwards compatible. And obviously, as it often occurs in today's world and with today's technology, some of them already reinvent the wheel, but good data formats build upon what's already known by the industry, what is already established by the industry. So coming to PIDF-LO in an essence. So there are basically two terms. We have the presence information data format, PIDF, and this was actually quite some time ago. So this was released in the RFC 3863 quite some time ago, and it has a strong background based on messengers. So it was originally developed to track status, when you can remember like all the messengers like ICQ or something, or even voice over IP phones. You could put in some status like you were away from keyboard, do not disturb, online, etc. And the presence information data format was used in order to subscribe to those events, to the presence package over SIP, and you could retrieve the status information of a colleague, for example. So this was the background. And then it came along, especially in the emergency context, one wanted to enrich this status information by location information, which was then defined in RFC 4119. And this basically used, we will see civic address information to represent addresses, but also it used geographic markup language, GML, for geodetic locations like circle or points. I already said, okay, there are two different types of location information. So when you see the normal, let's say the normal, or what you would write on a letter, a kind of civic representation in form of an address. And we have an example here. So you see the country as Belgium, the county Brussels, the city Brussels, and then the road and the house number. So this is one form of representing location information in form of an address. The other way, geodetic, is the geographical shape or the representation of a location as a geographical shape. And this could be all kinds of shapes. So this can be a point, a circle, a polygon. Sometimes an arcband is more suitable, especially when it comes to cell tower coverage, for example. And in the example here, we see the circle, we see the latitude and longitude of the position, and we see the radius. I'm now walking through a real life example of a PIDF-LO, and we will walk through basically every element in the PIDF-LO and explain why it is there and why it exists. So starting with this presence tag, this is the start of the presence of the PIDF-LO. We see the entity tag, which basically is an unlinkable pseudonym, and it describes the location for that specific entity in this document. We then come to a tuple and the idea of a tuple. This kind of has historical reasons. Outside of the context of emergency services, you could have multiple tuples within a PIDF-LO. So you use the ID to identify the tuple. But in emergency services and how we are using it, also and how it's specified in NG 112, there's always only one tuple within a PIDF-LO. We have then the status tag, the geopriv tag, then it really starts with the location information. And here we have the circle example. The EPSG 4326 basically identifies the coordinate reference system, which is also required to be WGS84. We then see the position, as in the example before, with the coordinates, latitude and longitude, and we then have the radius. Again, here the EPSG defines the unit of measure, and in this case 9001 refers to the measure in meters. Scrolling down a little, so the circle geodetic tag is ended, and then we have the confidence, for example. So the confidence is a perfect example of what I said in the earliest beginning, that we say we need a data format which is extensible. So there is another RFC 7459, which defines basically the confidence tag, and this can be inserted, and it is already backwards compatible. So if you have an implementation of the PIDF-LO, there are certain extension points where you can add additional information, and parsers which do not have implemented the RFC 7459 will simply ignore this tag. And the RFC also specifies how confidence is calculated and how it is defined. So that's the end of the location information part. Then also very important in terms of routing and what you can do with that information. There are certain usage rules in PIDF-LO, so what you can do or should be able to do with that information. So in this example, the retransmission is explicitly allowed, but there could also be a retention period saying, okay, this location is only valid for a certain amount of time, and other usage rules. Another important aspect when it comes to location information is you want to know the source, so how it is retrieved. And here you can have like GPS, triangulation, a cell. So there are multiple ways to describe the method where this location is coming from. And last but not least, we have basically a timestamp representing the timestamp of that specific location information. What are the use cases and scenarios? Obviously, we will focus a lot on the SIP PIDF-LO part, but it's very important to understand that PIDF-LO as such is not limited to phone numbers or to represent location information for phone numbers. There are many other applications we also see, which means including location information for sensors, for example, for cell towers, IoT devices, alarms, etc. Another important way, and we probably will see that in later presentations as well, is that you have multiple ways of transporting PIDF-LO through your system. So it can be by value. We will see some examples of that. And also by reference, which means you're only getting a point and you need to resolve that location information. Considering use cases in the emergency world and in emergency conversations, we see PIDF-LO as being part of a SIP invite and SIP messages. NG112 defines PIDF-LO or has PIDF-LO integrated in one of the core services, namely the location information service, where our location information is represented as PIDF-LO embedded in the health protocol. And another use case of PIDF-LO is to have it as part of the mobile network providers interface, and we'll see some examples of that. Starting out with the SIP protocol and location by value, meaning that the location is already provided within the message. So on the left-hand side, we see the invite message and some SIP headers I left out to make it more readable. But basically, the two most important things is the geolocation routing header and the geolocation header. So the geolocation routing header determines whether the provided location should be or can be used for routing purposes. So imagine you could also provide other location information which is not meant to be used for routing purposes within the emergency conversation, and this header defines if it should be used or can be used for routing. Next, we have somehow the highlighting switched up in the presentation. I'm sorry about that. So the geolocation header defines the content ID, which basically is the identifier of the content where the location information is provided. So we see at the bottom we see the content type, application PIDF-LO, and the content ID matching the one in the geolocation header. And then we basically have the presence information document. And this is how systems like in the SIP, for example, know where to retrieve the geolocation within the body of a SIP message. So how does it look like when we get location by reference? So we again have the geolocation routing header serving the same purpose as I described before. But in the geolocation header, we now have an URL rather than a reference to the content ID. And as I said before, we need to, or systems which want to retrieve location information need to do an additional step in order to resolve that information from that specific URL. And this is basically done by using the HELT protocol. So HELT stands for HTTP-enabled location delivery. It is part of the, or it is an interface implemented by a location information service by a LIS, as it is specified in the NG112 standard. So what do systems need to do in order to retrieve the actual PIDF-LO from that location by reference? So as we see, the geolocation header describes the URL, and the systems wanting to retrieve location information provide an HTTP post with the request body on the left-hand side. So they say, okay, I want to retrieve that location information. And in this example, I want it to be a geodetic location. And the system then comes back with the response. And here we see that the presence and entity information is embedded in the location response. And this is actually the part. So location response is the HELT protocol, and embedded is the PIDF-LO. Another example, switching out of the context of SIP, is using PIDF-LO as being part of the location service for AML, for example. So you have a LIS which can act as an AML endpoint, also specified in the NG112 blueprint. And similar as or basically the same as location can be resolved when it comes by reference, it's the same protocol when you speak to a LIS, and you can integrate AML already that way. So that means you do not need to wait until you do not need to wait to implement PIDF-LO until mobile network operators deliver you voice over IP calls with PIDF-LO. You can already start here. And the idea, again, of course, is that the PSAP has one single format they need to understand for location information, whether it comes from AML or it comes directly from SIP. Another example also where it's important for PSAPs where PSAPs benefit from one protocol is when they want to integrate with mobile network operators. So we're talking a little bit about the context outside of, let's say you want to get the location for a number which has not initiated an emergency call. So in terms of, like somebody is missing or you need to track somebody. And usually mobile network operators provide an interface, more or less most of the time a proprietary interface to retrieve that location information from them. But there's also the idea or the benefit when they implement the HELT protocol, including PIDF-LO, you can, again, for the PSAP, in order to retrieve that location information, you can use exactly the same protocol again. And as I said before, the PIDF-LO geometrics are quite flexible in order to represent location information, even when it comes from a cell tower. So it can be a circle or arc bands, etc. So the key takeaways really are from this short presentation is that PIDF-LO is a standardized format for representing location information. It is flexible enough to support geodetic and address representations of locations, and it is flexible and extensible for future use cases in case of we need to, at some point in time, with moving technology, need to integrate more information here. It is also deeply integrated into the NG112 world, especially into the location information service, but obviously also in routing elements such as the ESRP. And also, if you already have in a PSAP or in PSAPs implement the PIDF-LO and can parse it, there are also other use cases which are not limited to phone numbers in order to represent and use PIDF-LO as a representation of location information. And by that, I'm opening the floor for any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you, Michael. So I think there are There's a couple of questions. We have one from Irache Gomez. Michael, is it usable in next generation eCall too?
Yes. The format in the NG eCall is a little bit different. So the NG eCall, as far as my knowledge goes, does unfortunately not use a PIDF-LO for location to represent the location information of an eCall. But of course, you can always, or probably elements such as an ESRP or BCF can transform it into a PIDF-LO in order to make it available on the same way to PSAPs.
All right. We do have these plug tests coming up, Etsy plug tests at the end of the month. And NG call is part of that. So there might be an opportunity to see if we can test that and prove it. I see another question from John Marcy. Is ENA also including language preference within PIDF-LO? Okay. Well, maybe the question isn't to ENA, but maybe is there something in a standard for emergency communications that would include a language indicator?
There's a document coming out shortly about, or it's already open, I guess, from this accessibility document, where it is described that it's not embedded in the PIDF-LO as such. So PIDF-LO as such still addresses the specific problem of location information, but you would have, let's say, user preferences like language, also like which services they would need in terms of, for example, sign language, etc. And this will be represented in some of the SIP headers rather than the PIDF-LO. But yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I see another question in the chat from Mert Deva. PIDF-LO can be affected by fake location applications. Is there any mechanism to prevent the effect of fake location applications in smartphones? Now, we do have Apple speaking later, but maybe, Michael, if you have anything to say about that.
I mean, from our experience, what you can do is obviously you can, like I said, you can query if you're getting a PIDF-LO from an end device and you don't trust the end device, you can always make a sanity check with the mobile network operator saying, okay, does this mobile have roughly the coverage, or is it in the coverage of the cell tower? And so you can at least, like sanity check if it's feasible, if it's not completely spoofed.
Okay, and I see another question from Sebastian Legoff. Is there some mechanism at BCF, that's border control function level, which can make a call possible using a default generic routing to default PSAP?
Sure. I mean, that's also like in the basic setup of your NG 1.2 architecture. So you would always can basically say, okay, you would rather do it in the ESRP usually, but obviously also you can have in the BCF some certain rules where independently of the location information routed to a certain PSAP. Actually, since you want to have a fallback in case there's no location, you kind of need that anyway, where to route a phone without a location.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And John Marcy has added another question in the Q&A. Have you experienced issues with session border controller technology blocking PIDF-LO?
Me personally, not. I know from the industry that yes, there are yes. So there are issues, and at some point you need to remedy those. Unless it's more often it's that it's configured to basically only allow certain headers and not multi-part MIME, for example. But especially with the EU legislations, you will see multi-part MIME, and session border controllers need to be able to handle those.
Okay. We might come back to that in the discussion at the end, because I know we do have a lot of different stakeholders on the line, and that might be an issue that they might be willing to share an insight or an experience on. Thank you very much. Just let me check. I think there was another question. We'll make this the last one for you, Michael, but how do you ensure interoperability when transitioning I think it should be from old TDM technology where PIDF-LO is not possible.
So, well, from my understanding, you can always put something in the header. So location by reference might be an option also regarding the question with the BCF. So most BCFs you can allow, for example, the geolocation header. Just thought of that. So those are ways around that, and especially when it comes to, let's say, interoperability in general, there are tests available for SIP and PIDF-LO. We provide such tests, test environment ourselves, and those would be the option to verify the interoperability.
Okay, and all right, that's great from the questions. I just see a comment that John has put in the chat window that in the USA there has been issues with stir shaking and PIDF-LO coexisting within the SIP header. For those who may not be aware, stir shaking is a protocol used for validating calling line identity. And John says that they are working on standards to clearly define both within the SIP header, and certainly that would make sense. Okay, thank you all for your questions to Michael. And we're right on time now to be transitioning to the next presentation in this webinar today. And it's a fascinating case study on the implementation of SIP PIDF-LO in Sweden. And Sweden are one of the first movers in the adoption of this technology in Europe. So this presentation will cover the key drivers behind the implementation, some information on testing, progress and timelines, and collaboration among various stakeholders to make it a success. So we have two presenters from SOS Alarm in Sweden. Firstly, Bjorn Skolund, who's a 112 operational specialist and no stranger to the INA community. And also I'd like to welcome Anders Forsell, who's a consultant at SOS Alarm. And together they'll provide an overview of Sweden's transition to IMS-based emergency communications and a dive into Sweden's implementation strategy for SIP PIDF-LO. And then after that, we'll hear from Tony O'Brien, who's a senior manager for emergency services at Apple. Tony will provide a perspective from the device side on implementing SIP PIDF-LO and describe Apple's role within the Swedish implementation project too. So I'll first ask Bjorn to share his slides, and Bjorn, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, I hope you see my slides now.
Yes, we do, and we hear you loud and clear too.
Thanks. Yeah, Bjorn from SOS Alarm. We are the PSAP organization in Sweden and been around since 1974. So we are actually turning 50 this year. And I'm pleased to have Anders with me, who is a specialist on telephony and location issues. So, and he calls himself a handyman. So he's been involved in the transition from circuit to packet switch telephony and the implementation of PIDF-LO in Sweden. And that's basically what we are going to talk to you about. And we'll start with an overview of our transition from circuit to packet switch communications, just 2 slides about that. And then we'll focus on the SIP PIDF-LO. Well, these circuit to packet switch communications started with preparations already in 2018, and the transition was started in 2021. And we think that transition may be easier in Sweden because SOS Alarm is the only PSAP organization receiving 112 emergency calls. So it might be easier in Sweden than in other countries. And I leave it now to Anders to go into how we did it practically.
Okay, thank you, Björn. I hope you all can hear me. Yes, we started with the preparations on paper in 2018, and transition started about 2021 or 2020, and we actually did connectivity with the 4 large MNOs in Sweden, and the thing that actually took the most time, I think, was to get the fiber connectivity. with all MNOs, it can be quite cumbersome in Sweden to actually get fibers to the right address and get it to work. And after we got that in place, we have had a lot of testing with both functionality to the functionality we had in the circuit switched, and that we received the same in the packet switched solution, and with all the redundancy and so on, with fallbacks to other geographies and so on. So we always can, the 112 call can always get to our PSAP. As well, I think it was almost earlier than 2018, our backend servers that are developed by a third party to us started to develop servers that had PS functionality. So it was also in early start. And then we actually, the first MNO that we switched over from the circuit switch to the packet switch was in, I think it was in September of 2022. And then we actually, within 3 or 4 months, took all four big MNOs with their own radio network in Sweden to actually be connected, and all the 112 calls was actually transferred from the circuit switch to the packet switch. And actually the packet switch were the early one was only connected to one MNO, so that was also a difference. When we changed to packet switch, we went with all four. Other phone operators, virtual MNOs and so on, can actually join if they want to send their calls directly to us. But no one has been really interested, since we have quite high demands on redundancy and fiber and so on, which can be quite costly. So MVNOs send their 112 calls to one of the 4 big operators in Sweden. And the approach for this was just do it, actually. So it was nothing to think about. Something else, Björn?
No, I mean, the strategy, it sounds like we did this with an elbow or something like that. But of course, there was hard work behind it. But I mean, we knew where the goal was. So it was actually just to do it.
Yeah, and this is a slide that highlights some of the learnings that we did during the transition. Since MNOs have different prerequisites, both in hardware and software and so on, and actually within their own regulations and rules and so on. So it was a little bit hard to line them up and have the same config for all 4. So it is a quite extensive testing with each operator, and to get the timers right and so on. So if we have some site that is down for some reason, that we route the calls to one of the working geographies. And that actually also include the network redundancy that we have. We have a lot of network redundancy with each MNO. And one of the things we learned is that it's really good to test that periodically with each MNO, because at one point we actually noticed that one of the MNOs had changed their config without telling us. So when we closed one site, it got a little bit not so good. Yeah, and to get traffic redundancy, it's really good to have, because then you can actually do some service at the network level and so on. So to get a really good redundancy is good to have. Otherwise, SIM cards from each MNO you want to connect, it's vital, I would say, we can test from each network, because all networks actually behaves differently. Actually, all devices behaves differently, and so on. So you can test this into, I don't know, really a lot actually. Test numbers, so we can actually test from each MNO, and that they route each number to maybe one geography, or if we block one geography, they are supposed to reroute it. So we have different numbers for all that, so we can test all kind of solutions. And it's very useful to have an SPC or an IBCF that can do SIP header manipulation rules, HMRs. So if we don't like anything we receive from the MNO, we can actually change that before we send it into our backend system. Yeah, there was some learnings. We actually did a lot more learnings, but this is maybe the most valuable ones.
Thanks, Anders. And let's go to the PID-FLO, which we are implementing and already has started with. And some words just around the importance of location for a PSAP. It might be obvious, but I mean, I want to stress the importance of it, because we ask two questions in an emergency call. Basic question: what has happened and where? And if we don't know where, it's of course impossible to rescue somebody in an accident or in need of help. And there are two basic important factors. It's accuracy. I mean, we of course need the correct location. It must be as exact as possible, and preferably as small radius as possible. And the reliability, I mean, it must be always available. It's not available in 100%. If we talk AML, the advanced mobile location in Sweden, we are getting it in around 80% of calls to 112. And PID-FLO now is an example of early location. It comes directly with a call, and it gives us a large radius, a large polygon, but even that indicates which municipality the accident is in. So when we know that and know what has happened, that gives the call taker an action plan, so we can start to handle the case and send help. So location is important, and of course we have other ways of locating emergencies. I mean, for fixed landlines, we have address databases. We have had the MLP, mobile location protocol, since around 2000, give or take some years. AML in Sweden since 2019, and of course we have eCall, which sends automatically the location. We have a 112 app in Sweden. We have the ability to send a web link to the user to give us the location into our PSAPs. And now we are introducing PID-FLO. And we have a new regulation, actually. I just want to share it from the Swedish regulatory authority, the Swedish Post and Telecom Authority, that within 100 meters from the actual location, in at least 80% of the 112 calls. And I think we are in that area, somewhat around this. Just a few slides to compare the MLP, the mobile location protocol, which we get from the mobile network operators. This is an example from 2017, I think, and this is a vast area. I mean, if you see the radius, it's like 12 kilometers. This was a test call which I made, and if you see the little red dot, that's the AML location I got from the same call. And the AML location was 13 meters. So 12 kilometers compared to 13 meters. I hope you see that this is quite different and a big help of getting quick help in an accident. And even if you are in a city environment, I mean, you can see the green sector. It's like, well, most of the central of Stockholm, while the radius of the AML, I think you can see there a little red dot with a yellow within, it was 5 meters. And in both cases, I actually, when I called, I wasn't inside the MLP sector. So a better and the best location available is very important to us as PSAP, and of course for the user to getting help. Anders.
Yes, thanks. And this is just a comparison between one actual call we did last week, where we have the AML and the PID-FLO. The green circle is the PID-FLO, and the AML is the yellow one. So it's basically the same radius. Yeah, you can change the slide. As I said this earlier slide, it's basically the same, we think. We are actually just in the early start with implementing it. So what we have seen now, it's basically the same as AML for the positioning. It comes directly in the call, but as of now, around, I would say, like 25–30% of the early PID-FLO is a large radius, often due to cell or Wi-Fi positioning. But later in the call, it's always like AML class on the position. AML comes later in the call. For Sweden, it's 7 and 25 seconds for Android. And Apple, it's around between 10 to 20 seconds, or if radius is under, I believe it's 65 meters. Maybe Tony can say something about that. One really good thing is that PID-FLO works with seamless calls to 112, non-authenticated calls without the SIM card, and it works perfectly. We tried it last week. It will generally work better with foreign subscribers than AML, since some device manufacturers don't have implemented to send with a long number, as we use long number for AML in Sweden instead of just 112 to send their SMS. So PID-FLO will work better for foreign. And it can contain other data. As we saw Michael's presentation, it can contain municipality, postal call, address, and so on. You can almost put anything in there, actually. PID-FLO lacks the IMSI and IMEI, or part of, as we get in AML. That can be, for AML, is quite good sometimes when we have some troubleshooting and so on, just to see why different devices behaves differently. Then it can be really good with IMSI or IMEI. But from my understanding and what we have seen in PID-FLO and our setup with the MNOs, we don't get that data with the SIP. Yes. Learning as we go. And for our backend system, from where the slides has been shown, our map system in the backend, we have weighted the PID-FLO lower than both MLP and AML, so it doesn't visualize for the PSAP if they don't choose to want to show it. Then they can actually see the PID-FLO in the map as well. But otherwise, they will always see the MLP or often the AML, since that comes later and have higher weight in our system. Around 0.5% of all the 112 calls contains PID-FLO at the moment. Our implementation is actually not 100% according to specification, and that's regarding to updates. We will talk about that a little more on the next slide. And to get this to work, we had a lot of dialogue with the 4 MNOs. And I think there was one question if the PID-FLO element was actually sent, or it can be stopped in an SPC or an IBCF, and that was actually the case with one of the MNOs. They screened the PID-FLO element, so they had to open it and so on. So it was very good to have the dialogue with the MNOs. PID-FLO can actually affect the SIP and the packet switching, since they can be quite large. If we put a lot of data in the PID-FLO, they can be quite large. So you need to address so you can manage the data sizes in the backend system, so nothing goes wrong, because that could actually rendering the 112 call to not be received by the PSAP. And our implementation has gone quite well, so we could have done that without disturbing the call taking to the 112. And since we have all the other positioning solution in place that Björn talked about, this is just something that will make things better as long as we go forward. This is actually our wish list we have compiled and sent out to chipset and device manufacturers, since PID-FLO is basically governed by the chipset manufacturer. And actually what we don't actually support to specification is the one in the bold, where we actually liked the position to be sent periodically with an update or a re-invite, instead of how it's in the implementation from the 3GPP specification, where you actually send an info and get a publish back from the device to get an updated position. We actually asked for to updates to be sent periodically every 30 seconds. Some have listened to that, and some have not listened to that. So it's and I understand those who doesn't want to change their specification, and actually this is off specification. So, and we have a subset of the geo shapes that Michael talked about. We actually just support the circle, the 2D point, and the 3D point, and the ellipsoid at the moment. They are actually 8 shapes, I believe, in the RFC, but we are not supporting all of them. So we asked the manufacturers to only go with one of those 4. Yes. Next. So this is one liner from Björn. We have fruitful meetings with Apple to move forward. We have a lot of meetings, so that's have been great. We have a lot of meetings with the 4 MNOs, and some of them are more eager to test new releases from different device makers and so on, and chipset, and some of them just implement stuff in their network. So if you have a good connection and meetings with the MNOs, it's very good. Also good collaboration with the our third party of the CAD system, our backend system, and that's Onda. So that's had worked beautiful as well. And the collaboration with the chipset manufacturers have been so-so, and that's actually because it's not an easy task to get a hold of those people. Actually, we have some through our MNOs that worked, but we haven't reached all of them yet. Björn, do you have anything else?
No, I'm good there, and I leave it to either Tony or back to you, Freddie. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Anders and Bjorn. That was really interesting. We do have some interesting questions there as well, and we're running a little bit behind, but we do have that allocated time for questions, so we certainly have plenty of time. So rather than take the questions right now, I will hand over to Tony for his presentation, and then we can take all of the questions related to the Swedish project together. And Tony, don't be worrying about the time. We do have plenty. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Freddie, and Bjorn and Anders, and hope everybody can see my screen. So good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, first of all, to Ina for putting together a dedicated webinar on this topic, and judging by the audience that's here, certainly a lot of interest. The discussions, I think, are very timely for lots of reasons, and I think the conversation and the questions, certainly from some of the implementation experience from Sweden and from Portugal to come, will be of interest. My name is Tony O'Brien. I'm part of the safety and location team here at Apple. I'm based in Dublin. Apple cares deeply about the safety and security of our users, and we aim to provide the best possible data in support of emergency calls. As many of you know, our location estimation technology is called HELO, which stands for Hybridized Emergency Location, and we make HELO available to all mobile network operators. HELO allows Apple devices to combine data from multiple sources such as Wi-Fi, GPS, etc., to calculate the best, most accurate location estimate possible. So when a user makes an emergency call using modern technologies like VoLTE or VoNR, VoIP, or Voice over Wi-Fi, Apple devices are able to transmit HELO using SIP. This can make a location estimate available to PSAPs early in the call, as Anders pointed out earlier, and also enables a location-based routing. So it helps to get emergency calls to the correct PSAP on the first try, and then reduces the need later on for transfers between different agencies. The SIP approach also allows location updates to happen during an ongoing call. SIP deployments, as Michael touched on earlier, are based on global standards. They provide robust confidentiality and integrity mechanisms, and also support both domestic and international roaming. So we're going to step into some of the attributes of SIP PIDF-LO and highlight a couple of them, and some of them have appeared on Anders' screen previously as well. So SIP PIDF-LO as an emergency location transport technology has been around for a long time, and it's very robust, and it's available today. As highlighted by Bjorn, Sweden is deploying SIP PIDF-LO, and we've been delighted to be able to work closely with the SOS Alarm team over the last number of months. And I think a big congratulations to Bjorn and his team for who we believe to be the first PSAP organization in Europe to deploy this technology. So SIP PIDF-LO works on compatible devices that are in a limited service state. Anders touched on this just a minute ago, meaning that the user is attached to a network that they are not a customer of for the purposes of making an emergency call. It also works on compatible devices that are in a no SIM status. So if the network permits devices to make emergency calls while in that state. And as we know, emergency calls from SIM-less devices are not supported in every European country, but in those countries where it is available, location information can be conveyed using SIP PIDF-LO. SIP PIDF-LO also resolves the issues of locating users who are roaming both domestically and internationally, and who are calling the emergency services for assistance. Their location data is transported to the PSAP using this technology. It is call associated signaling, which permits the user's location to be transported and delivered to the PSAP as soon as the emergency call is answered. And there's no delay in receiving the location information in the SIP invite. There are location updates allowed during the emergency call in the SIP update, which allows the call taker or dispatcher to receive more up-to-date information as the call progresses. It's a secure signaling technology and is secured by mutual authentication between the device and the network. This ensures that the location data is shared only between a genuine device and the serving network. SIP PIDF-LO, as mentioned earlier, supports many radio access technologies. It's available on 4G, 5G, VoIP, and Wi-Fi. It is not supported on 2G or 3G networks. So let's reflect on some kind of practical steps as we think about implementing this technology. As we know, there are many EMEA countries examining SIP PIDF-LO today, and indeed many countries there is a regulatory requirement to deploy SIP PIDF-LO. Of course, it's a location transport technology, not just for emergency voice communications, but also supports text to emergency communications. And as a lot of the people in this call know, under the European Accessibility Act, obligations in relation to text to emergency communications is changing. In terms of existing investment, it's important to note that AML as a location transport technology can coexist alongside SIP PIDF-LO. In fact, some might even view AML as a backup for SIP PIDF-LO or supporting older legacy devices. But regardless of how it's viewed, the key point here, I think, is that deploying SIP PIDF-LO does not mean that AML is discarded and any previous investment made in terms of AML deployment is not lost. MNOs do need to ensure that emergency calls are supported, of course, on 4G and 5G, and they may have to configure some network elements to support PIDF-LO, and Anders touched on this a little bit earlier. The dialogue is very important, and as Bjorn mentioned, the dialogue between the PSAP, the competent authority, the mobile network operators, the handset manufacturers, etc., will be critical to any implementation. For any MNOs who are on the call, I'd certainly recommend you speaking with your Apple Carrier Account Manager, your CAM, to explore the possibilities of SIP PIDF-LO, and certainly for any PSAPs or public authorities who are on the call or watching the call back later on, there's an invitation to get in touch with us directly at safety_systems@apple.com, and we can follow up with questions and any other details that might be needed. Short and sweet. I'll hand back to Freddie, and maybe we can take some questions.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Short and sweet, but a lot of good points made there as well. So please keep them in mind when we do have a broader Q&A later. So what I would like to do now is go to all of the questions we have. We have questions in the chat. We have a few raised hands, and we have some in the Q&A. So I'll do the Q&A first, then I'll do the chat, then I'll do the raised hand. So bear with me. So the first question is from Hans-Peter Schmocker. How are you sending ML updates? So I guess this is to our Swedish colleagues. PIDF-LO via SIP, reinvite, or update. So I guess this is the handset location, just to be clear. When we talk about AML, if you look at the ETSI standards, you know, the device calculates the location using various means, and the AML standards really talk about the transmission of that into the PSAP, so whether that's over SMS or HTTPS. But so really that question is more about getting device location updates. So I'd maybe put that to Bjorn or Anders.
Yeah, sure. Regarding the updates in PIDF-LO and SIP, we are using the invite or reinvite and update. And regarding AML, we don't get any updates. That's just the instant 2 for Android and 1 for iPhone. No updates regarding AML.
Yeah, so yeah, I know you made the point about having the initial SIP PIDF-LO, which may only have some network location that isn't particularly accurate. and then you may get a later update that would have the device location, which would give you the same level of accuracy that you would get from AML as well. So, right, thanks. And then we have a question from John Marcy, and actually I think this was mentioned in the chat as well. So it talks about your presentation is focused on mobile telephone technology. Have you worked with introducing PIDF-LO requirements on fixed line VoIP networks? I suppose as the fixed lines transition into an IP multimedia subsystem architecture as well using SIP. So what about emergency calls originating on fixed lines and using PIDF-LO?
No, we actually haven't done that yet, but it's in the works or on the list to do, and we can't do it together. I think we need the regulating authorities actually on board as well, because I don't think the CSPs and so on want to do this if there is no demand, because it's going to cost them time and money to actually send that. And we have other solutions in place for getting location for fixed lines.
Okay, thank you, Anders. All right, we'll move to the questions in the chat. Bear with me here. See, so there's a question from Adam about fixed network operators. I think that's been handled. Hans-Peter mentioned network-based location as well for routing to the right PSAP. I think this is more a comment than a question. I suppose that's a statement of fact. You do get the network-based location almost immediately. AML takes 5 to 30 seconds. Then we have a question from Philippe. So the implementation does not support querying the location during an ongoing emergency call, according to section 51612 of 3GPP-TS. Anders?
That is correct. We don't support that in our backend system yet, and it was a little bit tricky for a lot of reasons to get that implemented, and that's why we actually asked the chipset and device manufacturer to actually change their way of doing it and send periodically updates as well. We are looking into fix the at the real thing to do it. So, yeah.
Okay. And Hans-Peter followed up with a comment about in Switzerland, PIDF-LO is used for fixed line location and location from private networks as well. All right. And then Elena had a question. I noticed that you still keep MLP after the introduction of PIDF-LO. What's the reason for keeping MLP?
One of the reasons is that it works for seamless calls at the moment, which AML doesn't, and PIDF-LO is such a low percentage. And one other big reason is that the regulating authorities, PTS in Sweden, feel like they can't actually demand the network's operators just for the network induced. So that's just the MLP, because the AML and the PIDF-LO is device introduced, and they don't feel like they could actually regulate on that. Björn, do you have any other comment?
No, it's correct that what you are saying. So we have a dialogue with PTS, but as you say, it's only the mobile network operators that they feel they can regulate. So we are on our own when it comes to manufacturers of devices and so on.
Okay. Thank you, Bjorn. I'm actually going to hold off on any other questions right for now. There are still a few there to look at, and we might come back to them in the end, in the general Q&A session, which is now going to be a lot shorter, but that's fine. Vitor, we will hand over to you now for the SIP PIDF-LO implementation project in Portugal, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Are you listening to me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes. Okay.
Peter.
And
Yeah.
you already see my presentation.
We do, yes, not in presenter mode,
Yes.
but there we go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So my presentation is about the implementing SIP PIDF-LO for emergency caller location in Portugal. On this presentation, I will cover the following topics: a short introduction about 112 transition to IMS-based emergency communications, implementation of the strategy for PIDF-LO drivers and testing, and collaboration and stakeholder involvement. So Portugal is the westernmost country of mainland Europe with more than 10 million residents. Our territory includes mainland Portugal and the autonomous regions of Madeira and Azores. 112 is the only emergency call number in Portugal. Seamless calls are available. We have 4 stage 1 PSAPs and 59 stage 2 PSAPs. The average answering time needed to get in contact with the emergency service is about 6 seconds. The 112 service here is under the umbrella of the Ministry of Internal Administration, and in accordance with the prevailing law, there is a shared responsibility. The operational part is the responsibility of the police, and the technology and the logistics is under the responsibility of the General Secretariat of the Ministry of Internal Administration. That's where I work, and I'm responsible for the information and communication technologies of 112 here. The 112 first stage PSAPs interface with 8 main entities. Voice transfer is normally just one entity to the ambulance service, and integration with the police, National Guard, and ambulance service, Maritime Authority, and Civil Protection Authority, including Madeira and Azores. So the following subjects will be covered on this presentation. The service providers, the telecom service providers had started the migration to SIP from ISDN on the 3rd quarter of 2018, maintaining the PSAPs last mile on ISDN. The PSAPs started the preparation of SIP trunks on 2022. And although the new regulation states that it should be enforced after 12 months, we are expecting to have SIP trunks fully functional on the 4th quarter of 2024. And we still believe that we'll start receiving SIP calls with PIDF-LO from at least one telecom service provider in the beginning of 2025. So a short overview of Portugal's transition to SIP-based telecommunications. So we started in 2025 with only with cell ID and a database for fixed landlines. In 2007, we deployed the eCall. In 2020, AML. And also, we have also an app for deaf people that sends us also the caller location. And in 2024, we started SIP-based. We hope to see it until the end of this year, and PIDF-LO in 2025. We hope to have the SIP, the PIDF-LO, receiving the PIDF-LO. The 112.pt has been using ISDN trunks since 2007. The service providers had started migration from ISDN to SIP on the 3rd quarter of 2018, maintaining the PSAPs last mile, as I said earlier, in ISDN. The PSAP started the preparation to SIP trunks on 2022. The development and tests have been made with the one telecom operator lab and with the consortium lab. When I say consortium, is the group made up of the companies implementing the NG112 project in Portugal. Also, the new regulations state that it should be enforced after 12 months. We are expected to have SIP trunks fully functional on the fourth quarter of 2024. Now, about IMS-based networks. The IMS network, it's the IP multimedia subsystem, is a standardized framework for delivering multimedia services like voice, video, and text messaging over IP networks. The IMS networks are under the telecom service provider's responsibility. ANACOM have regulated the IP interconnection between the IMS networks. You can see a link if you want to know more about it. So we didn't have any kind of intervention in this matter. Now we reached the part that is the most important piece of legislation for migrating migrating emergency calls to SIP. This regulation determines what information must be provided to PSAPs and how caller location information must be provided. As I said earlier, nowadays in Portugal, we are still using ISTN. The use of redirecting number to convey the cell ID information, and this is a non-standard implementation. But after the SIP implementation, we will continue to receive this cell ID caller location on a SIP header diversion according to the standards. Now we are not in conformance with the standard, but after SIP we will be. Even when we start receiving PID flows, we will continue to receive the cell ID information as a backup in case of a missing PID flow. I'll talk a little bit about the implementation of the strategy for PID flow, driver testing, and timelines. So in this slide, you can see a simplified diagram of the lab testing infrastructure we use to test SIP PID flow. The test starts with the generation of a SIP call with PID flow that is conveyed to the NG112, our SINet, that routes the call to the most appropriate PSAP in testing environment, where the call taker could pick up the call and see the content of the PID flow in the CAD system and visualize it on the on the map. There is not much differences between what we have in the lab and what we have in a real environment. So here in this slide, you see a simplified diagram of the SIP call delivery, but in real environment, the emergency caller location is conveyed by the telecom service. In this place in the lab, we had a SIP call generator. And now conveyed to the NG112 SINet that will route a call to the most appropriate first stage PSAP. After the call has been taken, the call taker will forward the voice and call data or just data to the most adequate second stage PSAP. Now, PID flow is mandatory for NG112. There is no NG112 without PID flow. I think that Michael Prosler already said it. So PID flow location is a protocol for transmitting geographic location information in SIP. It can be a powerful tool for emergency services, but careful should be taken. It should be given to its implications before deployment, of course. PID flow usage, the pros of usage. It's the accurate location reporting. It supports diverse location formats and interoperability and integration. So according to our legislation that was published recently, very recently, for physical addresses, the legislation states that the civic address format must be used. The civic address contains fields that can be used to specify a location quite precisely. A civic address includes countries, cities, streets, house numbers, and any information that might assist someone in finding a location. For mobile devices, the legislation states that the geodetic location must be used. So geodetic location is based on coordinate systems, most commonly those that include latitude, longitude, and sometimes altitude. One characteristic of geodetic location information is its ability to represent uncertainty. Uncertainty arises when a location determination method is imprecise. So, cell sector, in our legislation, cell sector is mandatory and arc band is optional. Of course, cell sector is just a particular case of arc band. So, as I said, arc band is also possible, but it's optional. So this means that if any of the telecom service providers is able to send us the arc band information, we are ready to receive it and decode it. So this means that the technological solution we are implementing is able to receive and decode cell sector and arc band. So these are a few examples of examples obtained during the lab test phase. You can see here a case of a PIDF-LO with civic addresses. You can see Lisbon, the road, the number of the house, and on the right hand you can see what the call taker sees on the CAD with the information, the decoded information. This is an example of the CAD with all the information that the call taker can visualize in the CAD system. This is another example of a PIDF-LO with a point. The location based on the device with geodetic coordinates, with latitude, longitude, and altitude in meters. Of course, our CAD is only 2D, it's not 3D, but altitude is there also. And the point is in green here, is a circle in green, just to improve the call taker visibility. This is another example of a PIDF-LO with a cell sector. That is mandatory here. And this is an example of what the call taker sees with an AML SMS, a cell ID, and a PIDF-LO arc band. Everything is here in the same view, and you can put them on or off in the right. You can see it in the right hand part of this screen. So the key drivers were IMS networks implementation by the service providers. Without IMS, we couldn't have SIP here and PIDF-LO. Opt-in for the standards, as Michael Prosler already said it. We follow the NG112 Corel. One of the elements of the NG112 is the location information server. So it is mandatory. It is a mandatory entity in the NG112, and this location information server supplies location in the format of PIDF-LO, by value, or by reference. But in Portugal, we will always use by value. We will not use reference. Now, in the next slide, it's about the CAD changes we have to do to accommodate the SIP PIDF-LO. DNG112 receives and processes the PIDF-LO sent by the service provider and delivers the result to the CAD, which presents it to the 112 call taker as map. This requires CAD solution changes, namely into the caller location processing components, information to be present to the call taker map and locations list, databases, and reporting. Now, just talk a little bit about the collaboration. We have made several and successful tests with one of the main telecom service providers. The consortium has been able to generate in lab the SIP calls with caller location using PIDF-LO. The lab replicates the entire 112 solution. A presentation of a fully functional solution using the consortium capabilities has been made in July 24 this year. So the 112 team and the regulator ANACOM were present in this functional presentation. It was a live presentation. All parts of the present project, including the regulator, ANACOM, telecom, and service providers, and the consortium have been cooperative and helpful on this transition project. So I finish here my presentation. I saw that I probably repeat some of the concepts that you've seen already during other presentations. I apologize for that. I'll try to be as succinct as possible. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vitor. This is very interesting indeed. Thanks to all the presenters today for really interesting presentations. We've ran over time a little bit on the presentations, or actually quite a lot. But I think it was worth holding on for those because the information was really useful. So I'm going to first ask a question that's directed to you, Vitor. Does Portugal use the diameter or the altitude of the GPS position of AML? And if so, in which geo object is the height packed? Don't know if that's...
No, we don't use the altitude.
Okay. Yeah.
Just the
diameter.
Just 2D, yes, the diameter.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, so it's X and Y at the moment. No plans for Z yet. Okay, great.
Yes. We will still receive it in SIP, of course, in the SIP header diversion.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll receive the other information also in PIDF-LO.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right. Now, thanks for patience to those who raised their hands. I'll go to Arache first. Arache, I'm going to allow you to talk now. You can ask your question. Go ahead.
One second. Now, man, my question before the one about the Q&A, the equal thing, I think you said that maybe it can be tested in the plug test. So I don't know if anyone can answer about that, but the Swiss representative in the chat said that they have implemented NG equal through PDF-LO, if I'm not mistaken. There was a link to a page, and yeah, I'm curious to know if it's going to be tested in the black test. I will tell my colleagues that are going to be there if they will, and yeah, it was just out of a curiosity.
Okay. That's great. Thank you, Arache. I'll now go to Karuba. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Karuba, the floor is yours. You should be able to speak now. You're still muted though. There we go. Karuba. We can't hear you. You're not muted, but we can't hear you. Okay, just while we're waiting, John Marcy has another question in the Q&A. One of the key parts of call routing via PIDF-LO is being able to accomplish the location validation function within the ESINet and with the PSAP. How are you accomplishing that capability? Do you maintain a central GIS that both the ESINet and PSAP query to validate location data in the PDF? I don't know if you can read that question, Vitor.
I'm looking for it.
Or perhaps Michael, I know that I see a lot of acronyms from NG112 there. If there's something you can add here, that'd be great.
Sorry, I was just focusing on answering Irach's previous question. What was the question?
Yeah. So just this is the question, an open question from John Marcy. One of the key parts of call routing via PDF-LO is being able to accomplish the location validation function within the ESINet and with the PSAP. How are you accomplishing that capability? Do you maintain a central GIS? I suppose this is the question. That both the ESINet and the PSAP can query.
So as far, I mean, obviously it's depending on the countries. A lot of
course,
countries have their, let's say, their own integrated, let's say, location validation function within the PSAPs. But as most use cases for PDF-LO are currently, I would say, the location information in a terms of geodetic way, where you, as far as I know, also in NG911, you don't do the LBF for geodetic locations, only for civic. So currently, I would say the use case focuses more on geodetic location, and if addresses are needed to be evaluated, that happens within the PSAP solution.
Okay, thanks, Michael. Okay, so we're just at the end. So we didn't get a chance to have a kind of a more broader discussion, but I do think we'll have an opportunity to speak about PIDF-LO again. So what I would like to do now, just in terms of closing, is thank you to all our presenters for sharing their invaluable insights and experiences, and to everyone who participated and contributed in today's discussions. We did have a deep dive into the challenges and opportunities of implementing SIP PIDF-LO for emergency caller location, and it's clear that the technology has huge potential to significantly improve the effectiveness of emergency communications and response. As we heard from our speakers today, successful implementation relies not just on the technology itself, but on collaboration across the entire emergency communications supply chain, from the device manufacturers to the network providers to the public safety answering points. At ENA, we're committed to continuing to foster this collaboration and provide platforms for the sharing of knowledge, best practices, and innovative ideas. And that's not just on implementing SIP PIDF-LO. In parallel with this transition to packet switched, you know, we're seeing real-time text being introduced, voice over LTE, video. They all are, you know, use SIP. PIDF-LO will be available with all of these. So there's an opportunity there to collaborate and generate synergies where we can throughout the community, because I think it really is going to require a collaborative effort to get all of these things to work end to end in a seamless way. So just a quick reminder, the recording of the session today will be available on our website shortly. Feel free to revisit any of the presentations or share them with your colleagues. If you have any further questions or ideas for future collaboration, don't hesitate to reach out to us here at ENA. Before we close, I'd like to mention that we have several upcoming webinars on key topics in emergency communications. On the 24th of September at 2:30 Central European Summer Time, we have a session entitled Tech Transitions, Implementing Change Effectively in the Emergency Field. And then on Tuesday, the 1st of October, also at 2:30 p.m., we will have Avatar 112 Deaf experimentation. This is using avatars and AI to a certain extent in doing sign language. So it's a really interesting concept, and it's quite innovative. So keep an eye out for that, and on our website for more information on upcoming webinars, and join us as we continue these important conversations. All that's left to say is thanks again to everyone, to my colleague Sana for coordinating the session, Thank you, Sana. We look forward to seeing you all again soon. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.